If you have a story, drop a comment below and subscribe to the channel. The Kennebunk Inn. Good evening. My name is Detective James Miller with the State Bureau of Investigation. For the past 32 years, I've documented unexplained phenomena across America. Some cases can be explained away by science, psychology, or simple human deception. Others, well, let's just say some files remain open for a reason. Tonight, I'm sharing one of Maine's oldest and most persistent hauntings. Before we begin, I should clarify that this investigation predates my involvement by over 2 centuries. I'm merely the custodian of these records, attempting to make sense of what numerous witnesses have reported across generations. Case file: Maine, 1799. KI date of initial report: June 17, 1799. Status: unexplained. The year was 1799 when the first documented incident occurred at what we now call the Kennebunk Inn, though it wasn't known by that name back then. Located in the coastal town of Kennebunk, Maine, the building began as a private residence for a wealthy shipping merchant named Silas Perkins. The initial report came from a household staff member who claimed to have witnessed items rearranging themselves in the home's study. Ordinarily, such claims would be dismissed, but what makes this case remarkable is its consistency over more than 2 centuries. Now, let me take you through the history of this case, the evidence gathered, and why, after all this time, the file remains open. Initial reports: 1799. On June 17, 1799, a housemaid named Margaret Simmons approached the local constable with a peculiar complaint. According to the original statement, preserved in the Kennebunk Historical Society archives, Simmons claimed that for several weeks, she had observed objects in the merchant Perkins' home moving of their own accord. Her statement reads, "I have witnessed, on no fewer than 7 occasions, the rearrangement of items within the study when no person has entered. Books once shelved will appear stacked upon the desk, quills and ink repositioned, the master's ledger closed when it was left open. I fear someone, or something, disturbs the household when we aren't looking." The constable, one Thomas Weatherby, dismissed her claims as the imagination of a tired mind. However, his dismissal didn't prevent other staff from coming forward with similar accounts. By July 1799, 3 additional servants had reported unexplained activities. The most detailed account came from Jeremiah Watts, the groundskeeper, who documented finding the main entrance hall meticulously swept each morning, despite no one having performed the task. In his statement dated July 24, 1799, Watts noted, "I arrived before dawn to tend the grounds, and have found for the past fortnight the entrance hall immaculately swept. At first I thought perhaps Miss Simmons or another of the household staff had risen early, but all deny responsibility. The peculiar aspect is the precision. The floor appears as if swept by someone with intimate knowledge of how Mr. Perkins prefers it done." Silas Perkins himself initially dismissed these reports, attributing them to staff confusion or attempts to cover for forgotten duties. However, by August 1799, Perkins began documenting his own experiences. Silas Perkins Journal, August-September 1799. Among our evidence is Perkins' personal journal, later donated to the Kennebunk Historical Society by his descendants. The entries from this period show a man struggling to rationalize the inexplicable. August 12, 1799. I have long dismissed the servants' tales as fanciful nonsense, but I must now record an observation of my own. This evening, returning to my study after dinner, I found my navigational charts reordered. They had been arranged by date of acquisition, as is my custom, but were rearranged by geographical region. Only my son Silas knew how I had considered reorganizing them thus. but Silas has been gone these 3 months, having taken a position as clerk at the Harbor Inn. August 28th, 1799. Again, disruption in my study. My quills, freshly cut yesterday and left in disarray on my desk, were found this morning arranged by size in their holder. The ink pots, too, had been moved from the left side of the desk to the right, precisely where Silas always insisted they belonged to prevent my sleeve from overturning them as I write. September 4th, 1799. I can no longer attribute these occurrences to forgetfulness or servants meddling. Last night, I intentionally left my ledger open to the shipping accounts from Boston. This morning, not only was it closed, but a mathematical error on page 37 had been corrected in a hand remarkably similar to Silas's. I have received no word from the harbor since his sudden fever took him a fortnight ago. I fear the worst explanation for these events. This last entry confirms what other historical records tell us. Silas Perkins, age 23, had died of fever on August 21st, 1799, while employed as a clerk at what was then called Harbor House Inn, the building that would eventually become the Kennebunk Inn, transitioned to Inn, 1800-1828. Following Phineas Perkins' death in 1802, the property changed hands several times before being converted into an inn itself in 1828. During renovation work, workers reported tools being relocated overnight, and more disturbingly, finding areas they had left unfinished, mysteriously completed by morning. The foreman's log from March 1828 contains this entry. Peculiar occurrences continue to plague our work. Yesterday we left the main hallway half-papered, intending to complete it today. This morning we arrived to find the work finished with remarkable precision. None of the crew admits to returning after hours. Of further oddity, the pattern alignment at the seams shows a technique I've only observed in the work of one clerk I employed briefly at the Harbor House before his untimely passing years ago. When the building opened as the Kennebunk Inn in October 1828, the new owner, Jonathan Bradbury, was reportedly unaware of its curious history. That would soon change. Documented incidents, 1828-1850. The inn's earliest guest ledgers contain numerous references to unexplained phenomena. Between 1828 and 1850, over 30 guests recorded experiences ranging from minor disturbances to profound encounters. Items of clothing folded neatly when left strewn about rooms. Personal papers organized chronologically. Muddy boots cleaned overnight. Beds made with hospital corners while guests were at breakfast. Ink wells refilled and quills resharpened. Most guests attributed these occurrences to attentive, perhaps overzealous staff. However, innkeeper Bradbury's private correspondence tells a different story. December 12, 1830. To my brother William, the incidents continue with increasing frequency. Last night, Mrs. Henderson from Portsmouth insists someone entered her room at precisely 3:17 a.m. and straightened her belongings. Our night porter, Wells, was accounted for at that hour in the kitchen with cook, taking his meal. No staff were on the guest floors. What's more, the lady describes the intruder as a young man of slight build with sandy hair, wearing an outdated clerk's uniform, a description matching no one in our employ, but eerily reminiscent of young Perkins, who once clerked at Harbor House. The pattern continued through subsequent owners. By 1850, the inn had developed a reputation for exceptional, almost supernatural service. Some guests specifically requested rooms where belongings would be attended to by the night clerk, despite the inn having no night clerk position. The daguerreotype incident, 1855. Perhaps the most compelling early evidence comes from 1855, when a guest named Thaddeus Chamberlain, a traveling daguerreotypist, set up an elaborate mechanism in his room. Having heard rumors of the inn's peculiar service, Chamberlain rigged a primitive camera trap, a daguerreotype camera connected to a tripwire that would expose the plate if triggered. In a letter to the Portland Gazette, never published but preserved in our files, Chamberlain described what happened. I set my apparatus before retiring to the parlor for the evening, deliberately leaving my papers in disarray across the writing desk. At approximately 11:40 p.m., a loud click alerted me that the tripwire had been triggered. I rushed upstairs with the innkeeper following close behind. Upon entering, we found my papers neatly arranged by subject matter and my daguerreotype exposed. When developed the next day, the image showed what I can only describe as a translucent figure bent over the desk. The figure appears to be a young man in the attire of a clerk from some decades past. Though the features are indistinct due to movement during exposure, one detail remains clear: the figure's hands, captured in the act of sorting papers. This daguerreotype, the first alleged photographic evidence of the phenomenon, remained in Chamberlain's family until 1912, when it was donated to the Maine Historical Society. Unfortunately, a fire in 1947 destroyed this section of the archive, and the image was lost. I'll continue with more recent documentation of the Kennebunk Inn phenomena